Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News. And today we're going to be talking about maritime law with Attorney Boris. And tell us your last name.
We do this every time. Zhadanovskiy.
There we go. Okay. And you're with the law firm of Cersei, Denny, Scarvola, Bernhardt, and Shipley.
It's a lot of names.
Yes, it is. And your last name's got more than almost all of them, all right? Almost more letters than all of them together. So maritime law, they're almost in 2020, there are almost 1 million boats in the United States, right? That have been licensed, right? 959,000. In Dade County, we're in Dade County right now, there are over 65,000. Broward County, there's some 46,000, all right, boats. And we know it goes right up the coast on both sides. So Florida's got a lot of stuff, right? A lot of boats and vessels, all right? We never know what to call it, a boat, a dinghy, a ship, a yacht, a cruise line, but your firm covers all these type of things.
We cover the whole spectrum, and the reason for that is because whether you're on a dinghy, a jet ski, a cruise ship, a barge, they all fall under the same category, overarching category of law, and that's called maritime. And maritime personal injury, if you're injured on a boat, and we'll talk a little bit more about the exceptions to the rules, but more than likely will fall under maritime personal injury. And I'm going to give a huge disclaimer to anyone listening to this. Maritime law is extremely fact specific, like a lot of areas of the law, but I think even more so when it comes to boating, because there's a lot of federal regulations that apply to it. So almost everything I say during this interview is going to have an exception, and it's going to have an exception to the exception, and it's going to have an exception to the exception of the exception. I promise you that, which is why it is so incredibly important. And I hate sounding like I'm doing a commercial, but if you're injured in a boating accident, you have to talk to an attorney that knows what he's doing, not only in the personal injury spectrum like car accidents, but specifically in boating accidents.
So I mentioned to you earlier, somebody I know lives on a lake. His friend calls, can my son come over? I'd ride one of your ski-doos. So they gave him a 10 or 20-minute ski-doo lesson. He was a passenger on the ski-doo, and an hour later he was dead. They ran into a piling. Such tragedy, right? And then when you look at it and say, that law concerning that is different than if I'm driving a car and I get into an accident. So even if it's on a lake or a canal, it's different rules.
If it's considered navigable waters, that's what the federal legislature decided would be the distinction, and it's a very broad category. So if it's navigable waters, then it's maritime law.
Sometimes I watch on YouTube and Facebook, you see these great big ships are coming in and they crash into another boat, or somebody's on the dock, right? They're on the dock, they're not on the boat, and this boat comes speeding in and hits them and hits the dock and injures the person. So even though that person was on the dock, on land, if you will, pretty close to land, right? Not on the boat, that still falls under.
Even if he was on land. Well, let's make the example a little bit more extreme, and it would fall under maritime. And the reason for that is the definition of it is if the injury, personal injury, property damage, or whatever arises out of the actions of a boat on navigable waters, even if the injury or damage is consummated, and I promise you that's not my word, on land, then it falls under maritime.
So when folks are involved in and around the water, they need to go to a law firm that has specific knowledge about maritime law. They don't want to go to their local shopping center lawyer, because this is very specific for this. And the rules are different, a lot different.
The rules are extremely different. And to understand why they're different, it would be important to talk about the two different avenues or facets of our civil justice system, and that is, what we always hear about is state courts, and then we hear about this, this scarier system called the federal courts. But on certain issues, the federal courts have jurisdiction. They are what's called limited jurisdiction courts for a reason. If you get into a car accident, you and your neighbor both pull out of your driveway at the same time, get into a car accident, you're both Florida residents, a federal court cannot hear that case. They have no jurisdiction to hear any of your disputes because you're both Florida residents, and there's no federal question involved in that dispute. Because anything on navigable waters is maritime, which is a federal question, a federal court can hear your dispute. And there are certain specific rules, regulations that are substantive, that even if you filed in state court, the state court would have to follow certain federal rules when determining legal issues and legal disputes.
So sometimes we get to see these great big barges with all those 20 or 15 by 30 foot long shipping containers, and you see it just sink or they all go over. It seems like that's a lot of damage that occurs in that. How much insurance do those big guys carry?
Hopefully a lot for those incidents. It all depends on what they're doing, the age of the boat, the amount that, what's on board. Right? Are they transport? Is it a garbage, barge that's just transporting garbage where the value of the load is not a lot? But then even in that situation, think about what the cleanup would be, right? That person, the owner or the company would be responsible for the cleanup of recovery of, if it's carrying vehicles, recovery of the vehicles, cleanup of the garbage. These are big issues to have.
So let's say you have your boat, you're out there and the boat sinks, right? Just sinks. Coast Guard comes and they rescue you, you're happy. How long do you have to come fetch your boat out of the water before somebody can come along and go, hey, it's mine? More or less.
Well, I'm going to do on more than one occasion during this conversation, I'm going to say it all depends. It all depends on what what is the jurisdiction of that water? Are you a certain amount off the coast where it's international waters? Are you in territorial waters? Are you in a lake where just the state has jurisdiction? What agency is investigating this? It truly all depends on what your requirements as the boat owner are going to be in the case of an incidental sinking.
And understandable. So lots of times I've never rented a boat, but I've been on boats that people have rented or that they've owned. But boat rental companies, what is the minimum requirement when they rent it to somebody? What's the minimum requirement that the driver of that, is that they call drivers? The captain?
Operator, captain,
operator, all right?
Commodore,
all right,
whatever you want to call them.
Okay, for a 25-footer, all right? What's the minimum licensing does an operator need to go rent a boat?
I have never rented a boat, and I truly do not know what the minimum requirements are. But, if you look at the requirements to even have a driver's license versus a boater's license, driver's license, it's not hard to get, but harder to get than a boating license.
Which is an amazing thing, considering that when you're in the water, you're subject to so much more nature than you are on the road. We got, here's the asphalt, go this way, all right? And if you will, the ocean is a road, except for it's fluid. And as we chuckled before, that Holliver Inlet, all right, as boats are coming in and out of there, you see them going sideways so often, and experienced captains are trying to navigate through there. And we've seen, both of us, I'm sure, have seen where people are getting thrown out of the boat, right? And it doesn't seem like they're going very fast, but when you hit those waves, all right, you get catapulted out and lots of injuries.
And the recovery efforts are difficult. You're not just catapulted out, and you're whatever injuries sustained as a result of that, but now somebody needs to rescue you. And if the boat captain that you're currently on is struggling to even get into the inlet or out of the inlet, you're in trouble. It's it's actually scary to me how little in licensing you need to operate some of these, larger pleasure craft. I'm sure if you're, and I'm not certain of it, but I'm fairly certain that if you're operating a commercial vessel, there's additional licensing that you would need over and above just a 20-foot single engine center console or something along those lines.
So in your best guess, are the minimum insurances that you buy on your boat, is that similar to automobiles, or are they just higher just by nature that it is on the water?
They are generally higher. Boats are not a necessity in our state. Some people, they may be a livelihood, they may be fishermen by trade, but for a lot of the boating community in the state of Florida, they're considered, pleasure craft, right? They're not a necessity. But with these pleasure crafts come great perils. The risk of injury is great. On a boat, you can't just hit the brakes, right? There is no stop instantaneous or after a short delay on a boat. They're harder to maneuver. There's a lot of them, and the lanes are fluid, as you put it, right? In the ocean's one thing, but even in the channel, you don't have specific lines. I know you have certain markers and you should be on the right or the left, but a lot of times there's 3, 4, 5 boats going in the same direction or coming at each other. Somebody's not paying attention. Somebody's having a really good time after a couple alcoholic beverages, and disaster strikes. And usually in a boating incident, there are very significant injuries because they're not the same safety mechanisms.
So let's look at these experienced captains going through the Panama Canal. And it seems to me in the last 6 months or a year recently where it just got jammed, right? It went off and it wound up, if I remember right, like sideways.
Mm-hmm.
And here are these guys with decades of experience, all right, and relatively calm, I suspect, but something happened. So all the product that was on there was weeks and months late to get to the consumers, right? And of course, then everybody gets frustrated with that. So when there's little things like that, although it turned out to be a big thing, right, it costs people a lot of money.
No, I cannot imagine what it costs and what sort of other incidental issues they had from all the other boats. And I think it was the Suarez Canal, not the Panama Canal.
I'm sorry.
But I would say close enough, but they're pretty far apart. I cannot begin to fathom how much money or damages we're talking about in not only what was on that boat, but the downstream and the upstream consumers, producers, and companies are waiting for those products.
So let's say you go out and you rent a boat, all right, and you're out there and everybody's feeling good, they have a few drinks, and the tragedy occurs. Do you buy insurance from the company when you go to rent it, or if you have homeowners insurance or car insurance, is there any and what's the connection there?
So I hope you buy insurance because first of all, automobile insurance is definitely not going to cover it.
Okay.
I can almost guarantee it. And in most circumstances, under your homeowner's policy, boating would be specifically excluded. If it's not specifically excluded, then you could have some coverage under your homeowners. But there are specific insurance policies that you can purchase for boating-related incidents where you become liable for either injuries, salvage, cleanup, whatever else you can imagine. So there are specific boating liability policies that are available to consumers because in most circumstances, your auto is not going to cover it, your homeowner is not going to cover it.
And your copay, deductible, and things not covered, better look at it because you're the first line of defense.
Absolutely, especially if you're at fault.
So, are you familiar with the pricing differences between boats and automobiles? Are they similar in nature? I mean, if you had $1 million coverage over here for cars and $1 million over there, are you comfortable with?
I don't sell insurance for a living. There are people that specialize in marine insurance. And I'm certain if they're watching right now, they would be happy to give you an answer.
So frequently when I'm driving and I see there's a truck next to me or a car, God forbid, all right, and they're towing this what seems to be a rather large boat.
Yep.
Right. And it's like there's a little hitch, it's connected like this, and a couple chains.
Yep.
And this very big trailer and this very big boat. One, I don't know how it stays up there, right? Two, how there are not more accidents with that thing like popping off of there.
Well, usually because the boat is worth more than the truck, people are very careful.
Yes.
I will tell you, first of all, in that circumstance, that's not maritime law, because that's not on navigable water.
Okay.
And in that circumstance, going back to your previous question, your car insurance would likely cover that because you're towing something and your car is directly related. People, in my experience, and you know the old saying, the best boat's your friend's boat. I have plenty of friends who are big time boaters, and I enjoy their boats tremendously. They're very careful when it comes to their boats, whether it's in transportation or use. So I'm actually not surprised that there's not more accidents when it comes to boats. Most people are on high alert when they're towing a big boat. Hopefully they're not texting. Hopefully they're not taking, typing emails while driving and towing a big boat.
There really isn't a connection between a careful automobile driver and them driving a boat because of all the other factors that go in: wind, tide, speed of it, right? Versus a car, as you're saying, just put your foot on the brake and you stop.
I've been driving for years. I would not feel comfortable operating a boat.
Yeah. So I used to do a lot of fishing and I enjoyed it. And sometimes they go, "You want to drive?" I said, "Why? Why do I want to do that? Have to deal with bang, bang." I know some people love it. And we see a lot of down here, we used to see a lot of racing, right? And these guys go pretty quick, right? And on some of those big boats that are racing, they have like 3 or 4 people that are involved in the movement of that vehicle. You got the guy like this, then you got the gas, and then you got some guy that's waving a flag or something like that. So it takes a lot of skill to do that. And so let's go from the ocean to a canal down in our favorite city down in Palmetto Bay, where there's a canal going through the town.
Okay.
That canal down there, all right, is maritime law. It's navigatable. And they're even in a dinghy or a small boat. That's it.
Navigable water.
So, we have big boat shows that have been down here. All right, I think some other ones are going to be coming back relatively soon. So the boat business is huge for our economies all throughout the state, specifically down here, and closer to where your office is in Palm Beach. The whole coastline is filled with boats, and the closer you get to your
hundreds,
hometown,
thousands, millions, absolutely.
It's just incredible the size of these boats. Most of them have captains, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's what they do. So getting back to how, if somebody is in a boating incident, right, what is it they should do? Something happens. They run into somebody, they hurt somebody, but they're the owner of the vehicle. They said, it's me. All right. Mm-hmm. Do the police come out? How does that work?
Absolutely. So they're, on land, we have the sheriff's office or the local police departments. Water, you have Fish and Wildlife. They come out to investigate any incidents on the water, especially if there is a risk of criminal charges eventually being filed because somebody was boating under the influence or something along those lines, or not paying attention. And it's a very similar process to what you'd have on land. There are statements taken, photos. Most new boats come with those GPS systems that track your location, track your speed. So there's downloads of all the electronic systems. There's accident reconstructionists that specialize in boating collisions that can tell you within a reasonable degree of engineering certainty exactly what happened. And
we know what you bought on Amazon. We know what you looked at everywhere else to boot. So when somebody is injured on a boat, all right, they have physical injury, all right, they were, whether they're married or single, and they can't work, and these they have the same recourse if it was on land, except for the jurisdiction is different.
So they can still file suit in state court under most circumstances. And again, disclaimer, asterisk, it's most circumstances.
Yep.
There are circumstances where that may be different. And the case itself looks fairly similar to an on-land litigation. You still have the depositions, the statements, the investigation that occurs, but the rules of engagement are different because it is now a maritime case. So they still have the recourse against the owner of the vessel or the operator of the vessel for medical bills, lost wages, the non-economic damages that we've talked about, such as pain and suffering and things of that nature. But again, you have to. The attorney has to know what he's doing because there's a lot of pitfalls. And I'll give you one example. All right. If you're injured on a cruise ship, you have less time to file a suit than you would if you're injured on somebody else's pleasure boat. And the reason for that is when you get on a cruise ship, you sign a contract that gives up about 3 years of your time to file suit. Generally, in cruise ship cases, you only have 1 year to file any sort of personal injury litigation. Sometimes you have to give proper notice within 6 months of the injury occurring. And it's little things like that for the unweary can be huge issues.
So if somebody's injured on a cruise line, they need to get to this right away.
Immediately.
Yes.
Immediately.
And so that you would have a short period of time to file the suit, even though it might take a longer time to get through it. So why do a lot of these ships registered in Panama and Denmark or Delaware or wherever it happens to be?
I'm going to speculate.
Okay.
Taxes.
All right.
All right. They have a much more favorable tax structure on their assets. A lot of insurance carriers, big time insurance carriers, international insurance carriers, have headquarters that are outside of the United States for similar reasons.
So there's so often that we hear, oh, the cruise lines didn't treat us correctly as far as a payout. And because it seems as though what I would hear, and probably erroneously, well, they go by different rules. When people say that, is that because of maritime rules or because it was where it's registered?
Maritime rules.
Okay.
In the cruise ship contract, and I'm going to speak in an absolute, but it's really just a generality because it's most cruise ship contracts. There's going to be a lot of things, a lot of fine print, a lot of disclaimers, a lot of conspicuously written language that the normal consumer is not likely to understand, but it is in there and it's been upheld by the courts. One of those things is going to state that you have 1 year to file suit, right, which is a shortened time limit than you would normally. And 2, it has to be filed in the Southern District of Florida in federal court. So in that circumstance, even though it is a maritime case, and in some circumstances you could file in state court, under your contract with the cruise ship company, you have to file within a certain amount of time, and you have to file it in the federal court in Miami.
That's because the cruise ships are here, and most of the people don't live down here, so they're going to have to hire somebody who the other side could say, you need to be in court down here.
A tremendous amount of case law, maritime case law, especially when it comes to your cruise ship companies, your Royal Caribbeans, your Norwegian, your Carnival, they come out of the Southern District of Florida. I'm speculating, but I would imagine that the federal judges in the Southern District of Florida deal with more cruise ship cases than anyone else.
So, Boris, prior to COVID, we would frequently hear on some of the cruises, not anyone in particular, that there was a group of people that got sick, they got the flu, or they got some stomach virus, and they were, pretty ill. All right. Do people file suit against the cruise lines because of some not a slip and fall, but because of some bacteria or virus they picked up?
They can, depending on the actions of the cruise ship company. So if the cruise ship carrier knows of a potential outbreak that's happening on board their ship, and they elect not to take appropriate action to contain it, to notify people, and to protect their passengers, their customers, then I could foresee a situation where there is civil lawsuits that are filed as a result of it.
And if a large company hides it, then they're really got a problem.
You always hope that they wouldn't, but we've all heard of instances where that occurs, and usually when that does occur, that does lead to litigation, likely in the Southern District of Florida.
All right. So again, if you go out on one of the party boats, I think they still have them downtown. You go out and you slip, and we got a couple minutes left. Thank you very much, Andres. And you slip and you hurt yourself. What should they do immediately? All right. A person that bought a ticket to get on a non-big cruise line, but on a smaller one. All right. What should they do immediately?
Make sure they get proper medical treatment. Yes. First of all, talk to an attorney. All right. If you bought a ticket, there's probably going to be contractual obligations on their ticket for potential notice requirements, potentially filing requirements. It's called a ticket contract for a reason. Sometimes purchasing the ticket is as good as your signature. So talk to an attorney that practices maritime law.
That's the big part of this, is make sure you go to the right specialist. When I was younger, if you were a contract, that meant you could do a roof or you could do a kitchen. That's not the case in law. All right. Mm-hmm. There's so many different specialties, a dozen or two or three,
hundreds of different specialties, hundreds. And I know, again, I say this time and time again, I do not want this to sound like a commercial. But what our office does is it specializes in personal injury cases, people that have been injured due to the negligence of somebody else. And we specialize in all facets of personal injury. Some people, stick to one or two things, but we have a large office. We have attorneys that have handled cases that involve plane crashes, train crashes, cruise ship injuries, container ship injuries, standard boating injuries. You name it. If a person was injured, we've handled it.
I know there's some people that are sort of hesitant. They go, "Oh, I don't want to go do that." And when I say you're hurt, and you may be hurt for a long time, maybe for years, maybe forever, and you may get two shots, but for the most part, you get one shot at this, all right? And making your claim. So it's important that people find the specialist that knows this, and they can get along with them. I know you do a lot of, if you will, Zoom. I know that's a generic term at this point. So you can handle people from out of the state, right? Your office is in Palm Beach. You have how many lawyers are in the firm?
I believe we're at 33 or 34, but I'm comfortable saying 30 plus. How about that?
And that's a significant size firm. And my congratulations on being able to build a firm that specializes in something that most of us don't know too much about. And most of the attorneys I know are, I don't want to say generalists, but that's a feeling that I'm getting. All right. And we are delighted that you're here. And again, and I know we've probably been through this a few times before, but I would like you to share with folks why you became a lawyer.
So, well, you're right. We have been through this before, but I always appreciate the question because I always like answering the question. And it's because the law is a foreign language to most people. And they don't need to speak that language 99% of their lives. But in that 1%, when they need to understand legally what the repercussions for their actions are, or what avenues of recovery they have. If they're injured, who's going to pay the bills? How does the insurance work? Were they injured due to negligence of a third party? What does that even mean? What avenues of compensation do they have in their fact-specific incident. And I always tell my clients that sometimes, look at the case, look at the cases that my firm is handling and say, oh, my case is not that big. My case is not that important. I was telling them, your case is the most important case that you have. All right. And it's that 1%. It is hopefully the only case that they will ever have. But in that instant, they need somebody who speaks that foreign language, who can guide them, and who can help them make decisions for them. The attorney will never make the decision for them. All right. I legally cannot, but I can help them make an informed decision on whatever they're deciding, whether it's to file suit, whether it's to pursue someone for their negligence, whether it's to settle their case, whether it's to file a specific document that has legal repercussions, whether it's to try the case in front of a jury and to actually put them on the stand and let them tell their story to a jury. It's incredibly fulfilling line of work.
And we know that the clients and people, they want the beginning of resolution. And until it gets formulated about the plan of action, all right, people are really nervous. And so we know when people go to professionals, they can lay out this plan. This is what's going to probably happen in the next 3 months or 6 months, so that the injured party can go back and try to enjoy their lives rather than wondering what they should do, right? And so you're very comfortable to talk with, and I appreciate that sometimes people aren't, but when people go to you, I can see that they're going to be comfortable, right? And we like it that you give information to people. They can make their own decisions on how to do that. And when I do stuff, sometimes I'll bring my wife because I want her to be happy, and if we're going to do that, that'll work too. So again, Boris, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And folks, you can find Boris and the other 30 plus lawyers online, all over Google, and you're in Palm Beach, but you take cases all over professionals and personal injury, right?
Personal injury, we handle cases throughout the state of Florida. We have attorneys that are barred in practice in other states, and I have personally, and other people in other attorneys in my office have handled cases internationally as well. Canada, Switzerland, and other places. And the one thing that a lot of people misunderstand, it's actually something that my wife asked me, probably way too late. It was kind of a strange question that came out, years into my practice. It was, how do people pay for your services? How can people afford to get a personal injury attorney? If they were rear-ended or in a boating accident, and it's the no fee guarantee. And you hear that commercial all the time, and I don't remember whose commercial it is, but what does that mean? That means there's absolutely no costs or fees unless there's a recovery made on your behalf.
So somebody could call you, meet with you, discuss their case. The two of you decide the best course of action, and then and when you take a case, you're pretty confident that you're going to win it because you don't want to be spending your time, all right, and your firm's time for going down a rabbit hole, right? And so, again, you let the people know. If they come to you, you say you have a good case or you got a lousy case, so that people can get back on track to where they need to be.
It's a commitment for both sides.
Yes.
And again, there's no upfront costs, and there's no fees or costs unless we are successful.
That's tremendous. Boris, thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate your time. And Andres, thank you for doing this. And folks, again, this is live with Miami's Community News, and you can reach Boris and his colleagues all over Google and all over the internet. Thanks, folks, and have a good day.
Their last name's a lot easier.
Yes.